I'd like to introduce your background for those who may not be familiar with you. And again, such a prestigious history and experience, so I'll do my best to summarize this in the best possible way. Moty Cristal is a professional negotiator and expert on cyber crisis management. He is the founder of Nest Group, former lieutenant colonel in the Israeli Defense Force, serving official positions in Israel's Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Defense, professor for negotiation dynamics at Moscow's leading business school. You've also established a Center of Negotiation and Network Studies, as well as a lecturer at the leading executive MBA programs at Tel Aviv University. So you now consult on cyber crisis internationally, and we're very happy to have you on the episode, Moty. So thanks for joining us.
Gabe, my apologies for the internet connection. Sometimes when you negotiate with cyber criminals, it's a good excuse that you get off radar for minutes or even a day. It allows you time to reorganize and ask your questions. So I'm with you, Gabe.
I feel like you've alluded to Ben being a cyber criminal because he did negotiate his way into you keeping the background. So perhaps that's what the mic drop moment was before when he disappeared on us.
Yeah, that was actually just the internet connection going down so I could pop up inside his network.
Moty, would you like to open up perhaps with, I'd be really keen to know from your perspective, what are some of the most interesting experiences that you've had dealing with cyber crisis?
Well, this is definitely a difficult question to answer because, like a homicide detective, each case is unique. Each case is very, very interesting. And each case really presents a different challenge. We have to remember when a company or an organization is hit by a cyber attack, hack, it could be a ransomware, it could be extortion. This is something that really shakes the organization. And the consequences, the human consequences in terms of action, activities, decision-making, dynamics among stakeholders, relationship between management and board, all these brings very unique phenomena. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, when the whole world saw a dramatic spike in ransom attack, because I would say in couple of weeks, the whole world moved to work from home or distant working, leaving all the networks completely open with almost zero security. So it was a heaven for hackers. And they realized that the first target would be online gaming companies. And we handled a case with a European gaming company that the requested amount was $7 million for the releasing or encrypting or decrypting the systems. I managed within, I would say, couple of hours, half a day, to reduce the amount from 7 million to 5 million. And I got that I have a good relationship. I have a good vibe with the threat actor. And I said to the CEO, if you give me another 24 hours, I will be able, I think, to bring it even more to maybe 4 million or 3.5. And he looked at me and he smiled. Are you crazy? In 24 hours, I will generate 20 million. So I don't care about this 1 million additional discount. Give me back the system. And, that's, again, it was an element of how many people, a general element, by the way, negotiation, how different people perceive differently issues which are on the negotiation table. And for that particular CEO, regaining control over his network was much more important than significantly reduce the requested amount.
That's really interesting, Moty, and I'm glad that we've kicked off with such a interesting story, because does that speak to the complexities of negotiation and that multifaceted layering of priorities and risk mitigation and those need payoffs as well?
Yeah, I think that the one of the things that in my routine, I would say in my routine cyber practice I'm doing is helping companies prepare for this crisis. I would cut to the bottom line. You cannot really emotionally or mentally prepare for such an event because that's the nature of a crisis. It hits you when you're the least prepared, when you are just about to launch marketing campaign, just about to finalize important M&A or go public or complete IPO. But what you can practice and prepare for is what we call structures and procedures. Exactly in order to deal with this multifaceted event and multi-layer, you want to set up a real functioning crisis management structure, which actually allows you first to make a very clear distinction between the decision maker level, whoever it is, be it the board, be it the owner, be it the CEO, and actually the crisis manager. And the crisis manager is the person who, at time of crisis, really orchestrates the various line of efforts, which I will explain in a second. And this crisis manager, the orchestrator, will never be the CISO or will never be the CIO, because when a cyber crisis hits the company, these people are really in the trenches. They fight the technological aspects. They are what we call they're running between the boxes. They're running between different machines, usually supporting the external incident response company that comes into the event. So this crisis manager needs actually to coordinate at least, I would say, 4 or 5 different line of efforts. The first is the technological line of efforts. Forensic investigation, try to understand what happens, create or make initial engagement, reach out to the threat actor. Myself as a negotiator, I'm part of mainly at the first, I would say, 24, 48 hours, I'm part of the technological line of effort. And our immediate responsibility is to provide the crisis manager and the decision maker a very clear understanding of the scope of events, which system has been compromised, what type of data has been exfiltrated, what is the amount of data that was exfiltrated. All these questions which are crucial for the decision makers in order to understand the scope of event. In parallel, usually within 48, 72 hours, the second line of effort, which is the business continuity, and to what extent the organization can continue provide services. You can imagine that a manufacturing company is not an online gaming and is not a school during summer break, like we saw recently in the UK. And, I was part of handling a UK school case, I think a year ago. I don't understand why they attack in the summer, but maybe it's a conspiracy of the teachers unions to. So the second is the business continuity, and each organization has different considerations. The media and the public engagement and how you communicate the crisis to the public is part of the second line of effort, business continuity, because the trust and the full transparency and the accuracy in providing details to the public, to your customers, to your business partners, to the suppliers is essential for this track. The third is the legal regulatory line of efforts. Every cyber crisis is governed by different set of regulation, system, reporting, announcement, and one of my, I would say it bluntly, one of our efforts as crisis managers in cyber is try to prevent the lawyers to take over decision making, because one is afraid of the legal consequences, but a strong CEO, and luckily I had the privilege to work with very strong CEO, trained, equipped, resilience, but not all of them are these. Like sometimes people, decision makers, are horrified by the legal risk presented, of course, by the lawyers in a tremendous impact, and that many times steal or switch decision making into the, I would say, the less effective result. These are the three line of efforts. And in parallel, you always have the insurer. Once the company is insured, that really could be very, very productive, constructive in supporting and sharing information, sharing knowledge of past experiences, because insurers are in this industry as well, and law enforcement. And the level of involvement of law enforcement and is very different. I met clients who immediately contacted the FBI or the local police. And I had clients that didn't want any contact until event and the crisis is over. And all these are the moving parts that you actually need to orchestrate, to coordinate in a cyber crisis.
So to summarize, Moty, you would have tech, business continuity, and the legalities, which includes regulation and governance and the like. Having been ex-military yourself, and of course Ben and I can resonate with this, are you in a position where you're playing it out or perhaps wargaming these scenarios and best preparing? I know you can't completely prepare for those type of crisis situations, but in terms of readiness, are you employing those sort of concepts and war games and tabletops and orchestrating in that effect as well?
Yeah, what we do in readiness is putting this structure as I described. So the COO will know exactly what is her mission. The chief marketing officer will know what she's doing in any crisis event. And once we put the structure in place, we try to simulate. And the simulation and the war games and in two different levels. The first level is the practicalities. So for example, I was handling last year an event that an Israeli hospital was hacked by a Chinese group. And in previous months or previous years, we've been training different healthcare providers in cyber attack. And many times when we get to the point that we say, okay, yeah, now your systems are offline, decision makers in this health industry, they say, okay, we move to manual. But this was never tried. So one of the first level of simulating is actually try to work manually. Bring down systems for 24 hours. You might even want to do it over a weekend to reduce risk, but turn off systems for 24 hours and see, can you handle logistics? Can you handle sales? Can you treat patient manually? Can you recover from backup? In simulation, sometimes it's just a box that you tick, check, recover from backup. But when was the last time that you are recovered from backup? So that's the first branch of simulating and practicing, literally doing the thing. And the second is, much more tabletop in the sense of playing the dilemmas. Bring the dilemmas. If the requested ransomware is 3 million, and when you pay the ransom, the recovery time will be diminished or will be shortened to 2 days. Will you pay? Okay, now if the ransom will be 30 million, still recovering with 3 days, will you pay the ransom? 3 million might be nuisance value. 30 million might be a significant amount. Have you contacted the privacy authorities in your country in order to, know who are the people with whom you will engage once you will be hit? All these are a long list of, one of my colleagues who are, a previous deputy head of the Israeli Cyber Directorate, he prepared a list of around 300 types of preparedness questions, which once you go through them, you will feel much more capable in handling them in an effective way when a crisis will hit.
Moty, have you got, apart from the answer being sub you on and get you to do it, How successful or otherwise do ransomware negotiations usually end up being?
Again, a question of terminology. How do you define success of these negotiations? One of when I negotiate, when I engage with threat actors, the we negotiate for three different objectives. The first is always negotiate for information. What does it mean? As I said, my role in the first 48 hours is to provide the decision makers as much information as possible about who is the threat actor. Is it a known group or an unknown group? Is it a group that has a reputation of being trustworthy in providing the decryption key and not publishing the data? Every day I spend in the morning, I would say an hour, 2 hours of reviewing the last night or the last 24-hour developments among the different threat actors. Now, with the war in Ukraine, that dramatically shifted or changed the landscape of threat actors. So I provide the decision makers a significant bulk of information to know with whom he's dealing in a crisis, in a ransom or extortion situation. So I negotiate for information. I negotiate for information not only to understand who's the threat actor, but in order to validate the technological inputs coming from the forensic and from the investigation. For example, if the threat actor says, I have 500 gigabytes of sensitive data, which is a common sentence, and we see through the forensic that only 30 or 50 gigabytes of data was exfiltrated, there is here a gap which is dramatically relevant for decision makers to understand whether they are facing 500 gigabyte data leak or 50 giga data leak. Of course, it depends on the type of information. So I engage, I negotiate. I said, give me some samples, give me some examples, give me a file tree to know from which you manage to exfiltrate data. So negotiating for information is an essential. And many times, a definition of success under this objective will be that I help clarify the scope of event for the decision maker. I can tell you that last week, a company, a European company, ended up not paying the ransom because the data or the information that I managed to secure from the threat actor made them or supported their decision that data is not that important to pay for. Okay? So whether it's, and the data was leaked and they moved on. Whether it's a success, it's a definition of success. The two other objectives is playing for time. Many times when a company decides that they don't want to pay for the decryptor, but they still need more time in order to recover, to fully back to business operation, or to prevent the story to be leaked until they finalize a certain business move. It is my responsibility to play for time, to through negotiation, through engagement, play for time. And the third is, of course, the negotiating for a deal. And negotiating for a deal, it's not only a good price, which means a significant discount, which now really varies, depends on the context, depends on the group, depends on the company. And sometimes you get 30% discount, sometimes you get 90% discount. And I strongly look, I would say, in a critical way on some recovery company which publish average. They said the average amount and the average discount. Why? Because unfortunately, decision makers are taken by these numbers. Their mind are anchored by this number, but the particular case could be significantly different. So, I don't work with average. I work with, a thorough understanding of the particularity of the case that I'm handling.
Life is about good deals, hey Moty?
Sorry?
Never mind.
What?
No, I said life is about good deals, hey Moty?
Yeah.
Hey, Moty, in a typical negotiation, what's your engagement method with the bad actors? Is it via application? Is it via voice? Is it, what does it, I know
I wish
every
it was
group's going to be
voice.
different.
I wish it was voice.
Yeah.
It would allow me another layer of engagement. It's always text for the reputable, serious, known threat actors. They have their own leak site, and in their leak site, on the leak sites, there is their own platform, chatbot platform, which they communicate, and you're the only one who actually have access, supposed to be. Sometimes the flips on that as well. Sometimes they send you to instant messages from Discord, different written platform. It's usually about the written messages, and also this gaps in time. Instant messages, when you communicate on Telegram, it usually will implicate a much faster negotiation. When you communicate on their platform and you see an ultimatum, a ticking clock of 7 days, you know that you can work using that time.
That must be difficult. You mentioned if you had voice, you could add another layer. How do you convey emotion in your negotiation? I know that emotion plays a big role in any negotiation. So how do you convey emotion via text in order to get your emotion and the client's emotion across to hopefully impact their decision-making from the nefarious side?
That's the challenge, and it's the challenge not only because you don't have voice or image. It's also a challenge because usually English is not their native language, and the nuances which you can deliver in English, doesn't come across as it in English in Russian. So when Russian, who's not a good English speaker, reads "I appreciate you," he doesn't know what does it mean, and it doesn't convey the full message. So the challenge is not only the lack of voice or image, is also try to convey messages in simple English. When we can go to our kids' teenage WhatsApp and see how they convey messages with a lots of emojis, which sometimes I use, and simple language. You can convey um, emotions, mindset, sometimes even threat in a single in simple language. Donald Trump taught us that you can use caps lock, in order to convey message. Well, I try to refrain from that, but that's really convey stress rather than emphasis of things. But yeah, that's one of the main challenges which we happily, discover each conversation how you can improve it.
In a lot of your negotiations, Moty, where is the key geographical areas that you're having these negotiations out of?
The key word?
Geographical areas.
Oh, I would say that uh, the I don't know about Australia. I know a little bit, but US, Europe, Middle East, Latin America, mainly targeted these geographies. US, Europe, Latin America, Middle East. They were mainly targeted by Russian. We do see a significant increase in Chinese and Koreans, North Korea threat actors. They usually don't engage. They usually encrypt the systems, send a very simple, unlike I would say the Russian-speaking threat actors. But we have to understand how it works, this system. Definitely until the war in Ukraine, the system was that you had, I would say, 10, 15 brilliant groups, threat actors, each one of them 30, 40 developers, not more. And they use the model of ransom as a service, which means they engaged affiliates. And these affiliates, I would say middle class, just to respect them and not to say low class, but middle class technological criminals that use as their affiliates, distributors. And they were from all over the world: Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, India, Brazil, Canada, European countries. You find criminals everywhere, and you find criminals with technological capabilities everywhere. So many times when you engage with threat actors, at the first moments, you might, engage not Russia, but this could be Venezuela or Philippines, but it's
Moty,
English.
that's interesting. You mentioned ransomware as a service affiliates. I want to dive into that a little bit. From the dark web, I know from my own research, you can buy, ransomware as a service organizations or affiliates, as you mentioned them. You can buy their services for as cheap as 500 Australian dollars, which is about maybe 300 US dollars at the moment. And with that, you fill out a performer similar to engaging in any business organization. It's essentially a contract. And the contract suggests what's your limit to which you want to provide ransom and what's your scale of where you wanted to achieve that. And then they will hold until they get X amount. Do you find it's easier to deal with those affiliates in ransomware as a service because they are a business-led organization, other than the professional gangs that are more targeting, the bigger end of town?
Yeah, usually when we deal with, I would say, middle class criminals, you see first that the amount is less. I would say 50,000 US dollars up to 150 US dollars, while the reputables are talking in millions. This is number one. Second, the level of technological sophistication is dramatically lower, which means that if you have a good incident response, a good technological team which supports you, you can easily recover from backup or even open or decrypt by yourself using other mechanisms. Yeah, there's layers. This is why I said that the first 24, 48 hours, our task is to understand the scope and understand who's the threat actors. Not every hack is the same. And I had I had recently a client, unfortunate, small, very small business here in Israel. And at some point, I scratched my head. I said, you literally, sorry, my language, you literally were fucked twice. It's not only that you were fucked by a low level criminal, he's also very stupid, the guy that we negotiate with. Really, it was terrible to engage. He disappeared for 2, 3 days and then replied, you know, answers that had nothing to do with the questions. And it was terrible. And it was nothing. It was, I think, like 5,000 US dollars. But for that small business, it was a lot of money. And all his, I would say, accounting system was off. And it was terrible.
Did you say that to him, Moty? What was his response?
He said, in Israel, in Hebrew, it was an Israeli client. In Hebrew, you said there's a very famous quote: "The one who was fucked once cannot get over it." I mean, if you fucked once, you'll be, fucked again and again. No, but that's not the case in cyber sphere. There is only one, I would say, known case, actually an Australian logistic company. I forgot the name that was hit twice. I don't remember the name.
I think it was Toll, wasn't it?
Toll, yeah. Thanks. And investigating this case, what we learned, I said very carefully because you never have all the information, is that the first time they completely mishandled and very badly engaged with the threat actor and handled the case. So this is also the reason why I say all the time with to angry clients, angry CEOs who were hit. I tell them, one rule as the hostage negotiator, I keep as a golden or an iron rule: always respect the threat actors. It doesn't matter how evil they are. It doesn't matter how much they are, non-communicative, non-responsive, to what extent they sometimes, curse you. Always respect the threat actors. Always treat them as highly professional in what they do. Why? Because respect as a universal value is a very reciprocal concept. If you respect the other side, you can expect to be respected. And I I'm not, unfortunately, I cannot publish testimonials of threat actors, but I get plenty of them saying it was pleasure working with you. The one that I said that decided not to pay, he wrote to me, I personally regret that we cannot come to an agreement. But I mean, always respect the threat actor. That's the golden rule of any hostage crisis negotiator.
Moty, there's a book I would read.
Sorry?
Testimonials. That's a book I would read. Testimonials of the criminals I dealt with.
I wish I could publish them.
Just the fact that you have hacker testimonials is brilliant, Moty. Potentially,
Yeah, I had a case. Conti is a very reputable threat actor. And one of the unfortunate practices among affiliates is sometimes they take credentials, they take the data, and they move from threat actor to threat actors. I concluded a deal with one of them. And after, a week or 2 weeks, the CEO started to get phone calls from someone who said, we have your data. And they're like, what? I mean, I paid to a reputable gang. And we shifted the call from voice, from phone to email. And the guy said that the attacker said, we are Conti. And I said, no, if you're Conti never communicate via email. Conti communicates via their platform. So if you're Conti, give us the credentials to the Conti platform. And we go to the Conti platform and then I said, I literally explained, like, hey, here is a receipt. I paid this ransom. And maybe, I don't know, but I don't know others, but I do have a formal apology from Conti saying, you're right, this affiliate cheated on us. And and then came the sentence which really reflects the mindset of these people. Reputation is more important for us than money. You're right. We are shutting down this chat. Good luck and the best to you. And that was, there is, I would say, code of honor. Well, maybe not a code of honor, but a business practice, a business logic. In my when I talk about ransomware, about the ransomware industry, I call it's a pandemic with a business logic. These guys, if they will not keep their reputation, they actually destroy their own industry because then no one will pay. And the distinction between reputable threat actors and I would say low-level criminals, this distinction will disappear.
Moty, perhaps this is a good segue into the human factor, which I've seen you speak about online, and there's a few resources there. the psychological motivations, reputable business logic, and all the rest, right? Cybersecurity and cyber criminals is literally underpinned by that whole raft of the human factor and the human centricity, surely.
The when you do Google image on hackers, you always see this guy sitting with a hoodie and computers and numbers, and I hardly use this image because this is not a good cyber criminals are first of all human beings with motivations, with families, with business politics, with internal structures, reporting. It's an organized industry. It's an organized system. This is why they can generate more than $20 billion a year. So in order, like any negotiation process, not on cyber sphere, any negotiation process, you need to identify who are the people, what is their personal interests, are they tired, do they work in shifts because they're available 24/7, am I talking with the same person? And I always try to reach out to the human behind the keyboard. Of course, 70% of my personal questions are rejected. We are professional. It doesn't matter my name. All these rejection of personal questions, but 20-30% answer. And sometimes while conversing, they hint something about their mood, about their capabilities. When a hacker writes me, I cannot give you a discount, my boss will kill me. And you understand the Russian mindset, he might be telling the truth. Maybe he cannot come below a certain number because he will not meet his KPI and he not be fired. He might be killed. He might be thrown out of a car because that's the business practice in his organization. So once you understand that behind the keyboard, there's no image of a hacker with a hoodie, but rather a human being, you find path to their needs, thoughts, concerns. And like in any business engagement, it's not only about the money. It's about respect. It's about achieving their goals. It's about status. It's about their sense of affiliation. All these, what we call in classic negotiation, the non-tangible human needs. So in my negotiations, I try to identify, I try to address, and I'm very careful about you. I try to take advantage. I'm trying to take advantage of these human needs in favor of my goals and objectives. Another important human factor is the organizational structure. Like in any business negotiations, you need to negotiate with someone who's authorized to take decisions. And if he is not authorized in taking decisions, it's a waste of time. So also in cyber business, in cyber crisis negotiation, like business, I ask usually at a certain point if the person I talk to has the authority or the mandate to give me a bigger discount. Are you authorized to give me a time extension? So I definitely play with that human factor. We are not negotiating with robots. There was one case with one group which no longer exists, Avadon, which I realized that I'm negotiating with a bot. And then I spent the whole night learning from brilliant Israeli startups how you get over the bot to the human agent, how actually you confuse the bot And it was funny because the client decided after 24 hours to end the negotiation because he realized that he can recover from backup. So I came to the client and I said, I have a particular challenge here. Can I continue to negotiate with the with the threat actor? He said, fine, go ahead for your own research. And it was an interesting, but that was a unique case that you negotiated with a bot. Most of the cases, 99% you negotiate with a human, and you need to play or take advantage of these human factors.
Having just done my negotiation course in my MBA, Moty, I reckon we should wheel you into Sydney University to give us some of these thought leaderships and insights into negotiations in the cyber world, and particularly with bots. Like, I'd be very interested to hear the catalyst for how you overcame that.
I have a good colleague, friend, partner there at your university. She teaches negotiation, Noah Shear, and we're working on a joint program there in Australia.
Amazing. I'll definitely put you forward as well, Moty. Maybe perhaps as well, like, are the students that, because you're actively lecturing for MBAs and the negotiation courses, are the students really interested in some of the stories you're telling?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Every, I would say, crisis or hostage situation is fascinating. From Kevin Spacey, the Negotiator movie, to how do you call it in English? Casa de Papel, the Spanish series Money Heist. Money Heist. So there are plenty of movies, and it's really exciting, this hostage negotiation. And as someone who's doing it in real life, negotiating with terrorists, negotiating with union leaders, not the same, negotiating with cyber criminals. This is, of course, exciting, students, and we take the important element of effective communication is when you teach business negotiations. This is something that I very carefully draw the comparison, because negotiating an M&A is not negotiating a cyber crisis, but there are elements which could be compared. First is the human factor, how you identify what really motivates the person with whom you negotiate. And the second is how you use communication and the whole art of what we call constructive communication. I'm not a SWAT. I'm not storming the house or storming the building, shooting at the hostage taker. My weapons is my language, my communication skills. And this is something that can definitely be taught to any business leader, how to listen to what they say, how to read the message which is hidden in the lines of a text message, what are the motivation, and how you construct the argument which will increase the chances of the other side to say yes, be it a business partner or be it a cyber criminals, because it's not negotiation. It's what I call the tactical part of negotiation, which is communication and persuasion. These are not the same. Negotiation is a much more comprehensive system, which includes many, many other elements. But at the core of any negotiation process, at the core lies this effective communication and a good understanding of the mindset of the other side.
Go on, Ben.
How is that then conveyed and effectively communicated on the flip side of this negotiation? So we've talked through how you negotiate with the nefarious side. How are you then bringing that back and effectively communicating that to the people that are being targeted, that are experiencing the threat? How are you effectively communicating what is being said in your negotiation backwards to the people that are being hit? And then how are you enabling the removal of emotion to allow for them to make critical decisions at a critical point in time?
This is I love this question because it touches on one of the most common challenges, usually not very effectively handled in any negotiation, and it's the need to change your tactics, communication, I would say tune, when you negotiate with the other side and when you negotiate with your own people. One of Harvard professors, Bob Menuchin, frame it across the table negotiation and behind the table negotiation. So how you communicate across the table. Across the table, either with a business partner or with your cyber criminals. As I said, you need to work a very careful language, very respectful language. But when you move to your own people and you negotiate internally, first, you have to understand that you do negotiate internally. You do negotiate with your boss. You do negotiate with your peers. You do negotiate sometimes with the public in the internal negotiations. However, in cyber crisis, I'm not negotiating with the decision makers. I'm an instrument. I'm a tool. I'm a communicator. My responsibility in cyber crisis is to present to the decision maker the picture in its most accurate manner, clean of any manipulation, clean of any nuances. In cyber crisis, when I convey the message to the client, many times I feel the strong need for me to give them a recommendation to pay or not to pay. And I deliberately, I bring this into the surface and I said, sorry, Ben, sorry, Gabe, I will not recommend you. I can again and again review with you the consequences. I can share with you the experience with this particular group. I can highlight with you from my experience, the various consequences of a decision to pay or a decision not to pay. But I will never recommend a client to pay or not to pay. And I can tell you that this attitude is highly appreciated and respected by clients. I always say, I'm not in your shoes. I'm not fully aware to the set of considerations that you have in mind. I can share with you the practicalities of this event. I can share you the experience with this group. I can outline for you all the consequences from our experience in dealing with cyber crisis. I can listen to your internal debate and maybe highlight or assist you in framing things, but I will never recommend you to pay or not to pay. You know, we had a case a couple of weeks ago that a client was attacked by a group that we handled 3-4 months before. And the type of decision maker, I would say, the leadership type of the CEO were similar. So I had to work very hard to persuade my cyber colleagues, the company with whom I work, to actually break the rule of confidentiality and put in contact these two CEOs. Because I said to my colleagues, we handled the case 3 months ago. We know that CEO, we know him very well. We have very good relationship with them. Now we're a client who needs someone to talk to, who went through this experience from a CEO perspective. So under all the NDAs and restrictions, etc., let's allow them to talk. And actually, it really helped them, and it really persuaded the second client to talk, because the conversation that he can have with a colleague who actually went through this crisis from a decision-making point of view is different than the conversation that he can have with us. So it was, again, asking about the internal negotiation and the internal communication, a crucial element in successfully manage the crisis.
How are you finding the differential modding in the way that different leaders handle crisis situations?
In the same manner that there are difference in dating.
All very much few and far between.
It's a human decision-making process. It's a human interaction. I cannot even categorize European decision makers with American decision makers. Even within an industry, online industry, you find completely different leadership types. There are people who are very, very much engaged and need another assurance and another call and another call. And let's have and there are people who said, okay, show me the numbers, pros, cons, Excel, very, very cold decision making. Some of them need to consult. Some of them will not move without a green light from the lawyer. And it's and there's also no difference, surprisingly, I would say, in gender situation. When we face women in leadership position, they do not act different than men in this type of situation. You might have thought, because in general negotiations, there are significant gender differences, men and women. But I can tell you from a crisis perspective, I saw almost no gender differences between men and women in handling and managing crisis.
Moty, is there a single sentiment or line of thought that is shared between CEOs post events like this? Do they walk away and say to you, "Oh, I wish we were more prepared. I wish we had done." If you could offer one thing up as a sentiment that's shared across CEOs as a result of your work to our listeners, is there one thing that they keep singing to?
Well, the examples you gave, Ben, are example of, I would say, self-reflection. I'm not a therapist, and I'm not getting into that stage with them. Usually when the event ends, they don't want to see me. Thank you very much. I mean, this is we are in a dark mode. They are in a dark moment in their lives, and they don't want to talk with me anymore.
Fair play. I actually thought this was a therapy session, so a bit confused.
Despite the fact that I stayed 2 weeks, they spoke with me more than they spoke with their wives or husbands. Okay, but after the event, no. Why? Because I remind them of this dark period. There is one sentence that I keep on hearing is, that was not random. We were not hit accidentally. I know this is this particular employee whom we fired. This is this business competitors. There's no random, no random. And it is our responsibility always to check any investigative lead that CEO said. And I will not tell you that we never had, there are. I would say that 5 to 10% of the cases, you can find traces to internal threat, internal perpetrators. But compared to the 5 to 10% that we find, I would say that 95% of the CEO are confident that it's internal, that they are targeted, that it is not random. And we have to say, After we check and we examine, no, actually, this is not, you are not targeted. And it's also not because you had weak security, not necessarily. Many strong security companies are hit. Sometimes it's a challenge for them. If there is one sentence, it's not about self-reflection and where I was wrong, but rather why me? Why me? I know why, because I'm targeted by evil known forces, competitors, employees, a business partner.
It's the need for attribution. As humans, we always want to attribute an action to something, someone, something, and unfortunately, the attribution in these instances just don't ever come back to close that loop, which is just part of where we live at the moment.
Exactly.
Moty, I feel like people look at you sometimes and they walk past in the street and think, "There's the digital Grim Reaper." I remember when he came in and he was the one dealing with our hacking incident.
Well, no, it is usually I work with cybersecurity companies or directly when people hear about my experiences. And thanks God, being a thick individual, I'm overwhelmed with either managing event or working with companies to strengthen their capabilities in handling events.
I just am a very big admirer of a lot of the intelligence coming out of former IDF professionals, and especially the contribution you're all making into the cybersecurity industry. So I appreciate you.
Thanks. I would just say that I had nothing to do with cyber in the IDF. I'm old-fashioned believer in human interaction. Cyber is just the mode.
100%. Right there with you, Moty. Hey, I've got a question for you, Moty, from our last guest on Dark Mode. How do we as an industry come together to ensure that we have a more sustainable future?
The good news is that there is an answer. The bad news is that we do not have a sustainable future. You know, COVID and the war in Ukraine, and what you there in Australia are going to meet in the future with the tension, the Asian tension, taught us a significant lesson. The era of stability and certainty is far gone. I'm educating my kids. Be very, very flexible and feel comfortable with uncertainty. So when my kids, even my mother, when she asked me, "Are you coming for Shabbat dinner?" and it's Tuesday, I will answer, "I don't know." Even if I know, I will answer, "I don't know." Why? Because people, my kids, my family, organization, institutions, societies needs to learn to live and to feel much more comfortable with uncertainty. It strengthens our resilience capability. So whatever happens, I played scenarios. I prepared. I have mental resilience and operational preparedness to deal with this instability. People who seek stability, definitely in the cyber sphere, completely looking for something which is unattainable and not achievable. Technology, AI, face recognition, quantum computing, all these will be in the use of the good people and in the use of the bad people. Cryptocurrency was supposed to solve the mistrust problem in the banking system, and see how has been manipulated And despite that this is the number one instrument for cybercrime, governments cannot really nullify the use of cryptocurrency. So we need to adjust the way we see the world. We need to give up the need to feel stable. We need to be able to train ourselves mentally, emotionally, cognitively to deal with many, many scenarios. And I don't know should be a common answer which reflects strength rather than weakness. I don't know. If this will happen, we'll do this. If this will happen, we'll do that. That is the modern, I would say, strength. Admit that you don't know, but be sensitive enough to build your mental capacities for that and operational capacities for that.
Incredibly profound, Moty, and I would say said like a true former lieutenant colonel, by the way. And potentially I take that sequence and broadcast it as far and wide as possible. Absolutely.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Ben.
Have you got a question for our next guest, Moty? I could write down and ask them.
Who is our next guest?
Big secret. Big surprise. I don't know.
Ah, good.
Are you testing me out?
So,
Baby, do it.
so I would the question for the next guest would be assuming I don't know who's the next guest, the question would be how you see the linkage between cyber crime development and geostrategic evolvement, and how you see this links between the I would say the malicious use of technology and the geopolitics.
Great question. There's a whole nother podcast episode on that, I feel like, Moty.
Yeah.
And you know who the next guest is, Ben? To take a look. There's a few really good upcoming guests in the next
That's a
couple of
great
weeks.
question for the next guest.
Moty, is there anything that you wanted to say to wrap up the episode?
Well, any episode like that, any education of the public is much appreciated. It's a significant contribution to education, because people today needs to be aware of what happens in these dark modes, and your effort to make things available and accessible and understandable even to people who have very little technological understanding is much appreciated.
Thank you, Moty. Much appreciated. Right back at you. And thanks so much for joining us on Dark Mode.
Thank you, Moty.
Bye-bye.